everybody, and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be talking about Superman issue 39, written by Joshua Williamson, with art by Dan Mora, colors by Alejandro Sanchez, and letters by Ariana Maher. Superboy Prime is left to reckon with his past this issue as Prime finds himself in his younger body, now confronted by the entirety of the superhero community who want revenge on him killing Superboy during the Infinite Crisis. None of the heroes can seem to hurt Prime, and Risk decides to try his luck, hitting Prime with his fist as hard as he can, but as soon as his hand comes in contact with Prime's invulnerable body, it explodes, blowing his arm off. Something that shocks Prime since he didn't do anything, yet everyone seems to assume that he meant for that to happen. Prime tries to get the heroes to stop since this is all Manchester Black's doing, but he soon remembers who attacked him after Risk. The Flash family speed into the area and try and grab him, forcing Prime into the sky. It's fun doing a trapped in your own mind storyline with a character who is well aware where they are in the dream, what they are doing. They're in an altered reality. They are completely aware of it. Even better when it's Prime trying to make amends by being a different person, trying to get his redemption arc, but the dream is determined to make him revert back to his more violent self. I also got to commend Williamson for actually doing this recreation of Infinite Crisis like almost exactly how it was back in the day. He is in Smallville, he's attacked by all of these heroes. Risk was a hero he actually fought before the Flash family came in, so it all matches up with the original Infinite Crisis, and I really like that. Prime continues to try and reason with the heroes, most of whom he doesn't actually remember the names of since they were all created in comic annuals and he hasn't read them. He tells them that he was manipulated, and thanks to reboot shenanigans, the timeline is reset and everyone who is dead is alive again, including Connor Kent. Someone asks if they are still alive as Prime is confronted by the EARTH-2 Superman, who tells Prime he never got to come back again after his death at the hands of Superboy Prime. Prime is shaken to see the older Superman, someone he considered an old friend, remembering this Superman is the original one from 1938 and the one he idolized. Prime tries to apologize, but Cal doesn't believe him since he's trying to take his place, figuring the kid couldn't live up to the legend since he's just a nerd playing pretend. Cal grabs Prime, speeding into space as he tells him that the real reason he wanted out of Limbo wasn't because his Lois was dying or because of what Lex was doing. It was because he was sick and tired of listening to Prime's constant whining since he never shut up. EARTH-2 Superman coming back was bound to happen in a Superboy Prime centric storyline, being the character's history is deeply tied to that version of Superman. He was a big part of Prime's early storylines, especially in Infinite Crisis, and as it mentions here, Prime saw him as kind of the mentor figure to him and the person he idolized. Obviously, it's not the real Kal-El, it's just Manchester messing with Prime and goading him into using that multiversal punch ability he has to try and take his power. But I really like that it's kind of getting to Prime as well, where like he knows he's trying to do good and trying to do everything, but everyone's like putting that pressure back on him be who he once was and to be what he was. And I like that there's that whole theme here of, you know, the past doesn't define you, and it's not something that should define you. It's something that is in the past. It's something it's past and been done, and now you move on from that. And I think that's a lesson that Prime really wants to learn. He wants to be a better person and move on with it, and it's probably very hard to do that when your knowledge of like reboots and retcons and stuff is all there, so you know it's kind of for naught because it's just going to keep reverting back into that cycle that I've talked about on this channel for a while, which is the constant reboot and retcon cycle where things people like come in and then they go away and are taken over by things people don't like, and then it's just this constant cycle. So imagine being a character who can actually see that, and it's probably very grating on you and it probably wears you down. And I like that Prime still just keeps trying to be Superman and trying to be that hero. It's really cool to see him actually try and stand up for himself and actually be better. As Superman takes Prime into space, Prime tells him that he won't fight the being as he's not real and figures he's just going to throw a car at him or something like he usually would do. So Cal decides to prove him wrong, tossing Prime into space before tossing the moon after him. Prime finds that so Silver Age coded as the moon collides with him and tosses him into the Timverse animated series. Prime immediately recognizes where he is as he now looks like a drawing that Bruce Bruce Timm has done, guessing that he's in the comic adaptation of the animated series for kids, something he watched as a kid. Manchester doesn't think that comics are for kids anymore, smashing Prime into the building and telling him he figured this would be better suited for his small brain to handle. Prime demands to know how Manchester is manipulating reality since it's not in his power set. Manchester decides to regale Prime with his backstory, or his most recent backstory that is, revealing that once he got back from Warworld with Superman, Lex Luthor used his powers to wipe nearly every mind on Earth of Superman's secret identity, and Lex believed that the process killed Manchester, and technically it did since his body was vaporized, but his mind and powers were scattered around Metropolis. Over time, Manchester was able to pull himself back together into a ghostly form, and when he did that, Prime ended up showing up in town, and he was ready to fight him, taking an interest in the new kind of Superman. Watching Prime reveal to Manchester that the hero wasn't from this reality and his connection to the world is unusual, allowing Manchester to manipulate reality and make his illusions more real, and he wanted all of that power for himself. That's a great use of the recent ending Manchester suffered at the hands of Lex back in Action Comics 1050. That was a while ago, and it took him off the board just long enough so that people forgot about him, so when he appeared a couple of issues ago, it was kind of a big surprise. It also seems to be playing out the way I assumed, where Manchester loves Prime since he's, the more edgy Superman, more his speed and in his gears, so he can finally win over a Superman. He sees Prime as someone who can be easily targeted and maybe manipulated, and he'll be able to get his technically he won over Superman win that he's been looking for a while. Manchester wants to team with Prime, but the hero wants nothing to do with him since he wants to make everything dark and gritty, something that Prime hates with a passion. Manchester gets the idea, touching Prime's head and zapping him into a literal world of grim and grittiness, one where all of the heroes wear trench coats, carry guns, and wear big dark armor while battling the villains. Even Prime finds himself in a trench coat and carrying guns, something he doesn't understand since why would Superman need guns? Manchester says that how else is he meant to play with super bullets, telling Prime to stop being a wanker, something he can say since he's British. However, Prime reminds him he was created by two American dudes. Manchester wanted him to say something like that since it shows that Prime knows everything about this world. He has that fourth wall breaking ability. He knows how the sausage is made, if you will, and it's given him a unique perspective on the world. Manchester knows that Prime wants things to go back to the days of yesterday where things were just smiles and cupcakes, but that world rejected him and he embraced the truth that hope is pointless, just like Manchester's world did. The villain wants both of them to make it right, with Prime punching reality and Manchester's mind left to guide the punch into the right place, a place where they can change reality for the better and make it like the world that Prime came from. So I like this. I like that Manchester is trying to manipulate Prime into using his abilities for something quote-unquote good and something for the betterment of everyone else. I like the idea that he is trying to manipulate Prime's punch reality ability and try to focus it onto something else, which is what we saw before was what he was saying. He can feed off of Prime's ability to do that, so in some way he'll be able to get Prime's abilities, and Prime's abilities make his illusions that much more real, and that's what he really wants. It's very obvious he's manipulating, but obviously Prime can't particularly see that version of things. He just knows that Manchester is a bad guy. Don't trust the bad guy. I also really like the idea that this world he wants to create, this perfect world, which I assume means if it's more like Prime's old world, which is technically our world, makes it more realistic and without heroes or powered people, which means he would technically get, the ultimate win over Superman, a world where he is not needed in any capacity and just does not exist. Prime tells Manchester that he will never punch reality again, so Manchester decides to punish him until he does, booting him into some other realities that the hero has never seen before. Prime falls into the old DC young romance imprint, finding himself in a 1950s romance story involving Witchfire, who literally throws herself at Prime, demanding that they get married and have kids. Prime is completely out of his element, being that not only is romance comics something he's not interested in, he has never actually read any, and he's barely had any relationship experience, so he has no idea what to do when a woman throws herself at him. That got a really good laugh out of me, because like what EARTH-2 Superman said before, Prime is just like a big nerd playing pretend, and I love the idea that he's kind of fulfilling that stereotype where he just doesn't know how to talk talk to women and is somewhat scared by them and scared by any sort of like intimate detail with them. But then also he remembers he's like Prime, he's Superboy Prime, he has all of this power and everything. I kind of like that they're playing with that and playing with the fact that, you know, these are comics that are more predominantly for women and for girls, so something that Prime would not be interested in, so he's out of his element. Mora also doing the art in all of these different things like the Timverse, that gritty universe, and now this one, all in different styles, has been so cool and fun to see. And I love that they're just going the extra mile with it as well, where they make the comic page look old and look like it's like from the 1950s, and it's just got like all the right sort of like text boxes and everything. Just like, it's just Dan Mora and his team just having fun and going wild, and it looks great. Witchfire comes in for a kiss with Prime, making the hero thinks he likes romance comics, but he snaps out of it once he realizes this is all just an illusion and not real. And he'd also prefer that him and Witchfire have their privacy without us reading about it. Witchfire flies into a rage, blasting Prime with the Doors of Doom, which causes Prime to fall into the DC horror comic imprint, one about a haunted comic book store. As he enters the creepy comic book store, we learn that ever since returning to the main DC universe, Prime's memories of the comics he once read are disappearing, and the longer he stays in the universe, the more his comic knowledge would be erased. Something we saw at the start of the issue, where he forgot who members of the Doom Patrol were when they were attacking him during Infinite Crisis. Prime feels Swamp Thing, the avatar of DC's horror books, eyes fall on him alongside Manchester Black as he enters the building, suddenly finding himself in a slice of life comic where he is working as a barista in a cozy cafe. Prime doesn't mind living in some indie darling comic, finding it all rather nice. He does wonder what happened to the comic book store, so he goes and asks his boss about the store, but the boss has no idea what a comic book is. Horror covers Prime's face as he races out of the building in fear, jumping through various formats like 50s sci-fi, a manga, war comic, and a sword and sorcery epic. As he jumps through these, Prime realizes he's in a 9-panel grid, wanting to keep moving before Tom King gets his hands on him, something which is endlessly funny. That I just love the idea of a character who is well aware of certain writers and doesn't want certain writers to get a hold of him. I also really like the idea, and I never noticed this until it was done in that kind of indie comic slice of life art style, but his boss, his comic book store boss that we saw a couple issues ago and then saw here, he particularly looks like Dan DiDio. Again, someone who was around when Prime was like the hot commodity, and someone who I believe championed Prime quite a bit, especially because he was killing off the Teen Titans. So I never put that together, but I wonder if that's kind of like a sneaky nod at maybe Dan DiDio, you know, being Superboy Prime's boss. That's kind of cheeky, and I kind of love if that was the case. Eventually, he collapses from exhaustion, and Manchester finds him again, pulling him into the Fortress of Solitude, where the villain is busy reading Adventures of Superman issue 500, the issue where Superman comes back from the dead. Manchester tells Prime that he never realized how much history repeats itself through reboots, rewrites, and retcons till he got inside Prime's mind, finding it a lame version of reincarnation. He knows that Superman will come back eventually, and when he does, he's going to send Prime packing. This is something I've been saying, and I said earlier on in this review that's been going on, where comics are all about repeating history, a cycle of reboots and retcons. Things we like and dislike come and go. Some new things get thrown in every time, and then they too also get mixed in, and you know, they go and then they come back, and it's just this never-ending cycle. Nothing is ever truly gone for good. Everything is brought back, recycled, rebooted, and rewritten. I like Manchester using that as the fact to try and convince Prime to actually help him, since with that knowledge that everything basically comes back around in a big circle, he knows that Superman will be back, so then Prime will be just given the boot. And we've seen that countless times where, you know, someone will take over a comic, then the real hero of that comic will come back, and that other hero will get relegated to like backups or like a special, you know, series, a small mini, and then they'll be quietly retired. And that's probably what's going to happen with Prime at some point. I know Joshua Williamson does have plans for him once Superman does come back, but I like that that's kind of planted that seed in Prime's head where it's like, oh, maybe I will be relegated to like a mini series or a series of backup issues. Superboy Prime knows that Superman will see what he has become and that he tried, since he sees the best in everyone. But Manchester isn't so sure, since all anyone has to do is check out Prime's back issues to find he's a real psycho and he cannot escape it. But if he punches reality again, he can change it all and he can just become the hero he wants to be. Prime knows that that would be cheating, and Superman does not cheat. Before he can say anything else, a League of Supermen, led by the Earth-2 Superman, attack Prime, intending on finally taking him down for good. Prime uppercuts Kal, but something in the air changes and suddenly the Supermen disappear and are replaced by the Justice League. The injured Batman tells Wonder Woman to use her lasso, and the Warrior grabs Prime's arm with the lasso of truth, revealing to Prime that he's actually been rampaging through the Watchtower this entire time, has killed Blue Beetle, Captain Atom, and many others. So this is actually stuff we've been seeing over the past couple of issues. There've been hints at like something going wrong, where like when Prime was fighting Ignition, he thought about killing the hero, and then he had visions of like Blue Beetle dead and everything, and then they were erased. And this entire time it's just been Manchester messing around with him, which I assumed was the case, but I like that this kind of gives us confirmation that Manchester has just been messing with his mind this entire time and just like trying to worm his way in and trying to, you know, sow those doubts that Prime voiced to Lois that he had, that like everyone sees him as this, you know, psychotic killer, and he hates that, and he doesn't want people to, you know, be talking about him behind his back and, you know, fearing him. He wants to prove them wrong, and this is like his worst nightmare. Prime panics, knowing that it was all Manchester Black who tricked him, but Batman knows that it's always been Prime, and the lasso is showing him the truth. Lois tells Prime that she trusted him and he betrayed them, causing Prime to break down crying, since all he ever wanted to do was to show everyone he could be better. With no choice, Prime smashes up reality, blaming everyone for ruining himself again. Prime immediately realizes what he did after he punches reality, and Manchester appears, thanking Prime for doing exactly what he wanted him to do, since he guided Prime's punch in his direction. The illusion breaks and Prime realizes that he never actually killed the League, as Manchester Black's physical body is returned to him, along with his fancy new powers, which he gets to keep. He grabs Prime, wondering what he's going to reboot first. Manchester with reality warping powers is certainly going to be an interesting thing to deal with, but I wonder if there's going to be some sort of twist come at some point. Like, he's actually isn't doing anything bad at all. He is maybe doing something good, and hell, maybe he's even responsible for bringing Superman home and fixing the timeline, since now he has reality powers. He could seemingly do that, and maybe Superman's lessons finally got through to him when they were on Warworld and all that sort of stuff, and he just had to go about antagonizing Prime in order to get what he needs to save Superman, and maybe it was like a test for Prime as well. Alternatively, maybe Manchester having these powers is what draws Superman back home to him to stop him. I'm sure Williamson has something fun in mind for the next issue, and I cannot wait to see what that is. Superman issue 39 was another fantastic and creative fun romp through Prime's time as the lead super guy in the main Superman book, exploring a bunch of familiar worlds, all while showcasing us that Prime really is a changed man, and he means well, and he wants that redemption arc he's been chasing for so long. I really like the dynamic that Manchester and Prime have, and I love that they're diving into the fact that these worlds are just in a cyclical nature of reboots, rewrites, retcons, all that sort of stuff I've talked about before on this channel, where everything that you like about a comic goes away, something you don't like comes in, and then it's vice versa. It just keeps changing in that cycle, and that's all comics all have been, and I like that Manchester uses that knowledge to try and get into Prime's mind. It's definitely a creative way to try and take down a hero, especially for Manchester, who's had some pretty creative ways to try and take down a Superman. Both Williamson and Morrow are firing on all cylinders this issue. The art was fantastic. I love the change in styles from page to page. It was fantastic, and it made me really excited for the third act of Prime's tenure as Superman as we enter the finale for his time and Superman's inevitable return in a couple of issues, and I just cannot wait for that. I'm going to give this issue a 9 out of 10.